Hello and welcome to this episode of The Defenders on Sunset TV, on which we are looking at China and India's military positioning and build-up along the Himalayas, but more importantly, China's military modernization and its more aggressive signaling to India's forces in particular and the Indian government in general, where it has adopted new measures to modernize its forces, their operations, as well as certain laws by which they have shown their intent that they don't intend to part with any of the territories that they have acquired through force or through encroachment. And we have two people who have looked at China in great detail. We have with us Lieutenant General PJS Pannu, who retired as Deputy Chief at IDS, but before that had commanded the much in news 14 Corps in Ladakh, and prior to that he was Chief of Staff of 4 Corps, which is in Tezpur and looks after the erstwhile known territories of Nifa, now Arunachal Pradesh. So clearly, expertise on China with him is something you can take for granted. And we have General Chakravorty with us, who has become an eminent scholar post his military tenure. But while in service, he has traveled across China in his capacity as India's DA in Vietnam, a country which today has good working relations with China, but previously was one of the targets of Deng Xiaoping's expansion agenda. But between them, they will help us understand why China is doing what it is and what China wishes to accomplish in the long term, because General Chakravorty has also authored a book on China and its military modernization. General Pannu, a number of monographs, papers and study reports and newspaper articles on the Chinese mind. So I'll start with you, General Pannu. You being a corps commander there, your successors have been involved in dialogue with the Chinese. And from what I understand, that there are only a handful of successes that we can boast of post the April 2020 incursions by the Chinese. And one of the reasons for that perhaps could be that China is determined not to part with this time what all it has gained. If you look back at the 62 conflict, they came much further than what is now the LAC, and they came beyond the McMahon line, but they chose to go back. So what is the change in their psyche? Why are they feeling more confident this winter and not going beyond the few concessions they have made to India in the last few rounds of talks, where they had decided to accept distancing of troops as a kind of de-escalation measure in Pangong Tso area as well as Gogra Heights. But now Hot Springs, I believe, is next on the target, and of course in the long run would be Depsang Plains. Your views?
Maroof, you realize that Chinese have started looking at India and the Indian borders as a secondary strategic direction. Earlier, it was hardly spoken, even prepared for. They were largely looking at the South China Sea and Taiwan. Taiwan being a erstwhile breakaway Chinese territory and now independent nation supported by the Western world. So when they were not prepared, the entire investment went towards reclaiming territories that side in Taiwan, which is still the primary interest and primary direction, strategic direction. But over a period of time, they realized that India and its neighbors like Nepal and Bhutan, also they have territorial interests here, and they have started expanding towards Pakistan, Sipek corridor. This area now, Afghanistan, is again becoming their expanded area of interest. So over a period of time, as they have grown economically, they have modernized their PLA. The Air Force and the Navy, in any case, I think got very large budgets because Taiwan was the central strategic direction. But the army was suffering. And I think somewhere it is also known that the PLA itself, which was basically the stronghold of the military, felt that they were seen as a secondary, or second fiddle to the Navy and the Air Force. I think this is where also the army has legitimately claimed that this is the area of interest, and obviously CPEC corridor, Pakistan now being completely into their folds, the Western world having pulled out, Afghanistan being a new playfield for them. So obviously they are looking at India, that they need to manage India because India would rise, and they don't want India to rise independent of China. They want India to remain subordinate of China. So the entire behavior and outlook and military expansion into Tibet in any case was giving a lot of perceptual trouble to them. As far as geostrategy is concerned, I think they also want Tibet as an integral part of China, not only how they think, but how the world should view about it.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. And Jen Saab, you have also traveled within China. You have written a book on China's military modernization. I mean, years ago, I had studied China's 4 modernization program, within which military modernization was one of the areas. But now more focused on military modernization, we are witnessing China's, as General Pannu brought out, that there has been an element of more funding that is going towards air power in the Tibetan plateau and the show of air power. For example, they have shown drills with the movement of howitzers and ground forces combining with air force, airlifting of forces, the use of drones. They are also talking about electronic warfare, special operations units, and of course, their legendary now cyber power. Your views?
Oh, well, Babu, firstly, thanks. And let me put it to you. China is really not in competition with us. Their target has always been, and this has been the United States. And when I was posted, as you said, in Vietnam, you see, I was a very important man because the United States embassy had just opened. And they relied on me more than anybody else, possibly, to give them some inputs in this. And as we discussed China, we found that possibly China was focusing, and well, they have laid down the timelines, which everybody knows, 2049, they hope to be possibly not only a world power, but the most important power. Now, if you have to take, since I've seen the US and I was in Vietnam very closely, the issue is technology. I mean, say I attended what you call the previous CDS, an interaction with him where he described technology as the 5th pillar. This was on 26 November. And China, if you take all their people in the Politburo, all of them are technically qualified, including Xi Jinping. Now, this is something which has started from the Jiang Zemin era. Now, when they have got into technology, I will straight away come to just 2. Firstly, artificial intelligence. I think Xi Jinping, 2012, he really gets into the Central Military Commission as the boss, and he puts AI right on top. And you brought out all these other things which follow it, and the Air Force and the drones. But the most important of them are, I think, drones.
Yes.
Most important is the C4I² SR. Today, the number of satellites which China has got, let's say today, we have, General Pannu has been in 14 Corps, and I was there when it was raised. I had just come back from Vietnam, as a matter of fact, and I had seen the 1st Corps commander and then General Arjun Ray came over. I would just put it, we always looked only what was visible to us. But today the Chinese have got so many satellites, they have got drones, and often they would know what we are doing. Now, if you look at it, even the present conflict which you have just referred, that is April 2020, we were lucky to get intelligence. We had to use even the P8I for doing it. China today has gone in for all-out modernization. You correctly brought out as far as the Air Force is concerned, I would put their main priority on Taiwan. But Taiwan has to be a combination of the Air Force, and it has to, and they are already carrying out intrusions which I would not like to highlight to that extent. As far as Tibet is concerned, the beauty of China is the number of airfields they have done. And not only that, you see their main air bases still remain outside Tibet because the height of the airfields over here are very high. So if you want cross airfields, so now they have come on to what is known as air-to-air refueling of their jets. And the combination of all these exercises where the PLA is constantly exercising. And the best part, we have got one Western, what you call command, theatre command.
We, matlab China has got.
Yeah, China has got. Sorry, we means, I'm sorry, I'm now talking like a Chinese, which I was often ticked off by General Malik, who was the chief then, that you are talking as if you are from China. But, well, possibly, what we mean is that the Western theatre commander is looking at the entire ball game. You look at it, we are divided between two commands, between so many corps, between some sectors here, there.
Two army commands, and there are actually 3 army commands.
3 army commands.
And there are 2 to 3 Air Force commands,
yes,
which are also looking.
I would put it 4 army commands. I have done a very detailed study and a presentation to the chief long back.
Anyway, so General Pannu, sir, I want to sort of take off from where General Chakravorty, because I mean time is of a premium in such shows. What were the reasons, firstly, that China withheld its horses after the Galwan standoff? Some would argue that the stiff resistance put up by our men was a shocker to them. Second, people would argue that the brilliant move by ITBP Special Forces in the Kailash ranges, unfortunately we squandered it by giving it back to the Chinese. But that came again as a shock to them of what we could do and how our mindset has changed, at least somewhat, since '62. And the third is the deployment of Rafale and other such fighters. General was talking about them now keeping some air component available beyond Tibet, because Tibet has its limitations because of high altitude where aircrafts can't carry the kind of payload and fuel. But what would you define as our near objectives to the LAC and the McMahon line as a defender, and beyond visual contact objectives?
See, Maroof, you gave a reference of Galwan, and you also spoke about our occupying the Kailash ranges. At that time, whatever happened was largely spontaneous reaction with whatever forces they brought, and the outcome is in front of us. Chinese are very good in vision and implementation with a lot of care. They will not just jump into something which they haven't calculated. And if they fear that they might lose, then they might take a step back, go in for a pause and come back with a better calibration. In fact, Chinese are more into understanding of how they have to fight with precision and how the escalation has to be highly controlled and successful. Even in the entire thought process, they never call attack an attack, they always call it a counter-attack. It means in their philosophy is that they would react, but they would react in a manner which even can be a proactive reaction for the simple reason. They are talking about the usage of a nuclear weapon, for example. They are saying that in case there is a warning, they would counterattack. So it means they're not that there would be an attack and they would counterattack. If there is a warning and they suspect that the adversary can actually launch a nuclear weapon, so they are calling it launch on warning. So their proactiveness is explained through reaction, so that they are never caught off guard that they acted and they failed. So they react and they succeed. That is the philosophy on which they work.
How interesting. General sir, you have written a book on China's military modernization, but obviously linked with that and linked to the point General Pannu has made, Chinese thinking. Now, the latest set of legislations that the Chinese have brought into play clearly indicates that they are not going to give an inch away from what they're already sitting on, whatever the assumptions in South Bloc. How do you think that China wishes to engage with us in a combination of what is now very clear in a diplomatic military engagement, and it is not diplomatic in a separate silo and military in a separate silo. Nothing has, to my mind, made the role of the military in diplomacy clearer than the post-Galwan crisis and the talks that followed.
Well, I think we just had the 13th Corps Commander talks, and the Chinese spokesman of Western, command, his statement says it all.
Yes.
And it's a statement which I think General Pannu has really said, and I would not like to repeat. He talks about peace and he talks about, defending and about, bringing about this thing, whereas it is an all offensive and just sticking on to issues. Well, I even have written in my book, China...
It's very interesting that all statements coming out of China publicly try to appear as that they are the defending party.
I just, a few months back, the Chinese ambassador, not few months, it was a year back, the Galwan incident, he came on what is known as the Institute of China Studies. There was a webinar. And our former ambassador, Nirupama Rao, who was also a foreign secretary, asked him that this is what is being quoted. He straight away asked one question. Ambassador, is this out on the official government site of China? She said, no. He says, then I'm sorry to say.
I can't comment.
I can't.
But Global Times is as good as official website, but Global Times...
Well, sir, Global Times, then so many army officers, they write. I mean, so I've been quoting them only in my books. I mean, so they are there, but when you sit across on the table and when you discuss with them, or let's say I was very fortunate to have Chinese brigadiers at home for dinner with their wives. Let me put it to you, it's a straight denial game straight away.
Yes.
And they believe in active defense. I mean,
no, also the thing is the Chinese in their negotiations always want to distract you, put you on the back foot. Nothing explains it better than Ambassador Gokhale's book, The Long Game, in which he talks about how they look at every negotiation as a long game. But quickly, sir, I want to probe you also on what is the thinking of the Chinese military theatre or the district which all now faces India. That is what we need to understand, because we are still debating about theatre commands. They are in place, they have a strategy, and they're working to a plan. Let us know.
So I'll be very simplistic in my answer. First, they're very clear that India is not a country which can be just, considered that it is a walkover. It's a powerful country. This needs to be kept under pressure. Now, territory is something which as you very correctly said, Mao gave up everything that he had in 1962.
Yeah.
He left, he's been chief of staff for he left and went. He could have kept all this for him. This is being done, and lastly, you must understand only Bhutan and India have not solved the borders. I was in Vietnam when the borders were solved.
But the theatre commands.
But the theatre command is a theatre command, if you ever have, is a direct, he has to be a member of the Communist Party. This is not an army of the government of China. If he has to decide something, it is Xi Jinping's decision.
Yes.
I remember meeting a few Chinese generals about a year back, and I told them that he says, how do you expect a platoon commander to be involved with the chairman of the party or the president? I said, I'm sorry, the Chinese system is a centralized system, and where everything that is small, that matters. And Xi Jinping from 2012 has focused on India. Believe me or not, while Taiwan and others are going on, because everybody, when I was in Vietnam, open Chinese saying, we feel that in Asia, India can fight us, Vietnam can fight us, and Japan can fight us. Japan is toothless.
It leads me to the next question that I had in mind for the general. In fact, I'll just give one comment. Ambassador Gokhale in his book, The Long Game, talks about the Chinese engage in strategic issues of foreign policy like an octopus. It has 8 arms, the foreign ministry, the intelligence agencies, the armed forces, the finance ministry, everything. And the head of the entire octopus and the system is Xi Jinping. Everything finally is approved by him, which is something that I've maintained all along. Nothing happens with the PLA by accident. It is to a plan, which is approved from the top. General Pannu. Chinese have been carrying out a lot of simulated exercises with new technologies, new weapons platforms, and offensive operations to apparently, as some Chinese spokesmen say, only to give a message to India. So question one, is that a message that has gone down with us adequately? Question two, how can China, while it is muscle flexing on the Taiwan Straits and continuing to stare at the Chinese, also look at engaging India, because India is not going to let them do any more Galwan type cases without not adopting a revolving door strategy in India's northeast? Your views?
Maroof, I will take a leaf from the last discussion and then come to your exercises, that Xi Jinping wears uniform by entitlement. Whatever he wants and whatever he wants to prove to the world and wants the world to believe in, that gets practiced on ground by the troops or by the economy, by the industry or whatever. In this particular case, the number of exercises, the infrastructure development which is happening and handling of the Tibetan population is by his design. That Tibet is a intrinsic part of China, and they need to defend it. And if they need to defend it, they need to build infrastructure and put enough modernization plans for population and as well as for the military alike. It is not only to send a message to India, but I think it is also to send a message to their own people in Tibet that they are very strong. And the military has arrived, because next to that is Xinjiang, where that kind of a confidence and that kind of a scare also needs to be delivered. So largely it is not the signal to India but to its own people in Tibet, and also largely they expect India to respond in a manner that stay away from Quad. Otherwise, India will have to pay on the borders by losing sizable amount of territory.
Because so you're saying India doesn't go beyond non-military issues in Quad?
Absolutely. So that is to limit India from looking at military alliances which are detrimental to the Chinese interests. So as a result, what happens is that the Chinese are looking at India to react in a manner in which they should allow the Chinese growth and the stature to come up as number one acknowledged power in the world.
Okay, quick question before I come to General. And that is, the Chinese apologists, I would say, have been saying that why would we have a confrontation with India when India has massive trade engagement with us, but they have massive trade engagement also with Taiwan and Japan. So they want to look at it in watertight compartments, whereas the view is that that is one area you can get China to back off on.
Chinese trade is in their favor, which is a very minuscule portion of the larger global trade, really speaking. I mean, even if they have to lose trade with India, it is a very minuscule portion of the larger global.
Considering the $300 plus billion with Taiwan and equal with Japan. And but US is much bigger.
At the end of it, the whole world is aware, including the Chinese, that India is a huge market. It should not be lost. It is not what they do today. It is what they intend to do tomorrow. Or largely, they have built an industrial complex. They need markets abroad. And their defense industrial complex has been so huge that I would say that 40% of the global consumption of the military hardware has actually started going outside. So they have started earning from the military exports to budget their own military forces. So what I'm saying is that the money goes into the military modernizes, they secure their own territories, and also the stature of a country cannot become large unless there are military power. So China wants to not only show, but also wants to put marbles on the table which count larger than the United States.
Clearly, that message is absorbed, at least by people like me. I don't know if the policymakers have absorbed it entirely. But China is not a pushover, even in the industrial field. And some of the new initiatives they've adopted in space and on territories is this. General Sir, this leads me to the last question. And that is that apparently in the past, the PLA saw that the military refurbishment and upgradation of their troops along the Himalayas was not of the same scale as they were probably adopting in the coastline. But now there are 30 new weapon systems that have been deployed by the PLA in the areas in recent time along the Tibetan region. And also, as General Pannu brought out, that China is very serious about China-Pakistan economic corridor and beyond. And one of the reasons why China has become a big global exporter of weapon systems, because when you add the total figures, but you look closely at them, bulk of them are sold to Pakistan. So Pakistan is their market, Pakistan is their vassal, Pakistan is part of the geostrategic agenda through CPEC. Your views?
Well, firstly, I agree with you that Pakistan is the most important, shall I put it, country for China right now. It used to be North Korea, Pakistan, but now I think Pakistan, but Bangladesh also, bulk of their weaponry is coming from China. As a matter of fact, with due respect to them, they have just celebrated the Victory Day and many of us have gone there. But I was calculating that as far as their armed forces is concerned and weaponry, maximum is from China.
75%.
75%.
Yes.
So if you look at it, China has been playing what you call its cards very well. And the basic issue, as he brought out and you have been bringing out, is everything is to a plan. And that plan doesn't get disrupted every 4 years, like in the case of United States, or in our case with elections every 5 years. A plan once made just continues, and I would say people die on the drawing board. And so is the modernization process going on. And you see, another great thing which we have so many Indians in the United States. My own son is an Indian. When the Chinese go there, the Chinese previously, when I used to go to the United States, most of the Chinese used to say, we belong to Singapore, we come from Malaysia, we come from Indonesia. Today they don't say that. Today they say very clearly, we come from Qinghai, we come from what you call, say, let us say, Canton, what you call Guangdong.
Okay.
So I mean to say, it's a big intelligence.
There is a renewed confidence.
Renewed confidence.
And also the fact is that everyone at the higher level that represents China is a member of the party.
Yes, very
so clearly, and the party's agenda are carved in stone, and you have to follow that. Thank you very much for your views, sir. And thank you very much for enlightening us. And thanks for watching. Until our next episode, goodbye.